Daniel was halfway through explaining to Judge Halbrook why I was emotionally unstable, when Claire stood up in the second row and said, "Your Honor, may I show the court something?" She didn't look at me when she said it. She was looking straight ahead, chin lifted the way she does when she's about to argue a debate point. She's 23, fresh out of grad school at UT Austin, and she had driven in at 5 that morning to be there. Daniel's attorney, Mark Ellis, gray suit, red tie, the same one he wore at our wedding 28 years ago, turned around so fast his chair leg scraped the tile in courtroom 3B. "What is this?" Daniel muttered. Claire was already walking toward the clerk with her phone in her hand. I hadn't known she brought anything. That's the part that still sits with me. Judge Halbrook adjusted her glasses. "Counsel?" Mark Ellis stood. "Your Honor, we haven't been made aware of any." "It's relevant," Claire said. Her voice didn't shake. "It concerns undisclosed financial transfers." The word undisclosed seemed to land heavy in the room. Daniel stopped fidgeting with his cufflink. The clerk connected Claire's phone to the courtroom monitor. For a moment, all we saw was a paused screen, our kitchen, the one on Cedar Ridge Drive. The clock above the stove said 10:42 p.m. Judge Halbrook looked at Daniel. "Mr. Whitaker?" Daniel swallowed. "I have no idea what this is." Claire pressed play, and the first voice the courtroom heard was his. The video ran for 47 seconds before Mark Ellis said, "Objection." The judge didn't say anything. She was watching. By the time it ended, nobody in that room was looking at me anymore. They were looking at Daniel, and I realized I didn't actually know what my daughter had recorded in my own kitchen. What had she been hearing that I hadn't? The judge called a 10-minute recess. Daniel walked straight past me, out into the hallway. He didn't make eye contact. Claire sat down beside me. She smelled like the vanilla lotion she's used since high school. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked quietly. She kept her eyes on the floor. "Because you would have talked yourself out of it." "Out of what?" Mark Ellis was already arguing with Daniel near the water fountain. I could see his hand slicing through the air, undisclosed transfers. Daniel had testified, under oath, that the only joint account we had left held $14,200. He'd said his consulting business had been struggling since 2022. He'd said there was nothing else. The video suggested otherwise. But how much otherwise? And how long had Claire known? For 28 years, I handled the practical side of our life. I've been a high school guidance counselor at Westlake High in Austin for 19 years. I know FAFSA deadlines by heart. I know how to help a 17-year-old write about resilience without sounding rehearsed. I know how to spot when a kid is lying because they're scared. Apparently, I did not know how to spot it in my own house. Daniel ran Whitaker Consulting, corporate risk assessments, mostly oil and gas clients around Houston. At least that's what I believed. He traveled, Midland, Corpus Christi, once a month to Denver. I packed his garment bag. I kept a folder in our home office with labeled tabs. Utilities, insurance, investments, taxes. He insisted on handling the business accounts himself. "Cleaner that way," he always said. I didn't argue. I trusted him. That word feels different now. The first crack wasn't dramatic. It was a missing 1099. Last February, I was gathering tax documents for our CPA, Linda Park, on Bee Caves Road. Daniel handed me a thin stack and said, "That's everything." It wasn't everything. There had always been 3 1099s from 3 regular clients. This year, there were 2. When I asked about the third, he said, "They downsized." I remember standing at the kitchen counter, holding that paper, thinking, "That's odd," but I let it go. Why did I let it go? Back in the courthouse hallway, Claire finally looked at me. "I didn't mean for it to come out like this," she said, "but he was going to get away with it." "With what?" She hesitated. "Mom," she said carefully, "how often did you check the business account?" I didn't have access. Her jaw tightened. Exactly. From the courtroom doors, we heard the clerk call everyone back in. Daniel's face had changed, not angry, not embarrassed, calculating. That scared me more than if he'd yelled. As we took our seats again, Judge Halbrook addressed Daniel directly. "Mr. Whitaker, before we proceed, I'm ordering a temporary freeze on all accounts pending forensic review." Forensic review. The words echoed in my head. How many accounts were there? And what exactly had my daughter captured on that video in our kitchen at 10:42 p.m.? Before I tell you what happened next, I'm Ellie, and you're watching Beyond Truth Revealed. If family drama, hidden secrets, and true-to-life stories are your thing, hit subscribe and join our growing community. Now, here's what happened. Daniel didn't look at me when we sat back down. He leaned toward Mark Ellis and whispered something sharp enough that Mark's jaw tightened. Then Daniel straightened his tie like he was about to walk into a board meeting instead of a forensic audit. Judge Holbrook folded her hands. Mr. Whitaker, the video presented appears to show you discussing a transfer of funds to an account not previously disclosed in your financial affidavit. Is that correct? Daniel's voice was steady. That conversation was taken out of context. Out of context. Claire stared straight ahead. The judge didn't blink. Then you'll have an opportunity to provide context. In the meantime, I'm appointing a court-approved forensic accountant. All domestic and business accounts will be examined for the past 5 years. 5 years, that meant going back to 2021. What happened in 2021? Daniel exhaled slowly, the way he does when he's trying to appear reasonable. Your Honor, this is excessive. Judge Holbrook made a small note on her yellow pad. Mr. Whitaker, if there is nothing to hide, you have nothing to worry about. He stopped talking after that, but his knee started bouncing under the table. Outside, the Texas heat hit us like a wall. Daniel walked to his car without saying a word to either of us. Claire waited until he was out of earshot. He's been moving money since at least my senior year, she said. I turned to her. How would you know that? She hesitated. Because I saw one of the bank alerts pop up on his iPad. He left it on the kitchen counter when he went outside to take a call. It was a transfer for $48,000. 48. I stopped. When was this? October 2020. That was the month we paid her first tuition installment at UT. I remembered that month clearly. Daniel had said cash flow was tight. He suggested she consider a smaller apartment. Did you tell me? I asked. I tried, she said quietly. You said your dad wouldn't lie about money. I had said that. I remember standing at the sink rinsing coffee mugs, defending him without even looking up. That night, I pulled out the metal file box from the hall closet, the one with 28 years of paperwork. I sat on the living room floor of the rental condo on South Lamar and started lining up tax returns year by year. I've always been organized. I color code college recommendation letters. I keep copies of every IEP I've ever drafted, but business statements? Those were never in my box. Daniel kept those in his office upstairs at Cedar Ridge, an office I hadn't stepped into since I moved out in March. I noticed something else as I flipped through the returns. In 2021, his reported income dropped by nearly 40%. In 2022, it dropped again, but we had remodeled the kitchen in 2022, new quartz countertops, custom cabinets from a place in Round Rock, total cost $62,000. He paid in full. How does income drop while renovations go up? And why didn't that bother me at the time? 3 days later, I got a call from someone named Thomas Avery. I've been appointed by the court, he said. I'll need access to all financial records, including any digital bookkeeping software your husband used. His voice was neutral, methodical. I don't have that, I told him. There was a pause. Mrs. Whitaker, were you ever listed as an authorized user on the business account? No. Another pause. That's unusual in a long-term marriage. Unusual. I wrote that word down on the back of an old grocery receipt. Unusual that afternoon. Daniel texted me for the first time since the hearing. We need to talk. I didn't respond right away. He called instead. Sarah, he said, voice low, controlled. This has gone too far. Too far? You let Claire ambush me in court. I didn't know she had that video. He was quiet for a second, then, you should have trusted me. The sentence landed wrong. I did, I said, for 28 years. Then he said something I didn't expect. You don't understand how business works. I've sat with hundreds of parents in my office over the years. When someone starts explaining something basic like you're a child, it's usually because they're trying to shrink you. I understand income and expenses, I said. I understand disclosure under oath. He exhaled sharply. This forensic review is going to cost us. Is there an account I don't know about? I asked. He didn't answer directly. Just let my attorney handle it. Then he hung up. That night, Claire forwarded me something. A screenshot. It was from the same video she'd played in court, but paused at a different moment. Daniel was standing by the island, his back half turned. You could hear him clearly. Move it before she files. She doesn't even know that account exists. The timestamp, February 14th. Valentine's Day. That was the night he told me he had to fly to Houston unexpectedly. I stared at the date for a long time. Move it before she files. Before I filed. But I didn't file until March 3rd, so how did he know? The next morning, Thomas Avery called again. Mrs. Whitaker, I've identified 3 accounts under Whitaker Consulting, he said. 2 were disclosed. The third was opened in Nevada. Nevada? Yes, Reno-based bank, opened May 2021. I sat down at my kitchen table. How much is in it? I can't give exact figures yet, he said carefully. But it's substantial. What counts as substantial, I asked. There was a slight pause. North of 6 figures. 6 figures. My guidance counselor salary is $68,400 a year. North of 6 figures meant what? 200,000? 900,000? How long had it been there, and why Nevada? That evening, I drove past Cedar Ridge. I didn't plan to. I just found myself turning left instead of right on Southwest Parkway. The house looked the same. Porch light on. Hydrangeas trimmed. Daniel's car was in the driveway, but there was another car parked behind it, a silver Lexus I didn't recognize. I sat across the street longer than I should have. Was it a client, a friend, someone who knew about the Reno account? As I pulled away, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging. It won't end the way you think. No name. No explanation, just that. I stared at the screen at the red light near William Cannon. Who knew I was digging? And how deep did this actually go? The text came again the next morning. Different number. Same message. Stop digging. It won't end the way you think. I was sitting at my desk at Westlake High, second period just starting. A junior named Emily was across from me, crying about whether to apply early decision to Baylor or UT. I nodded at the right moments, handed her tissues, circled deadlines on a yellow legal pad, but my phone sat face down beside my keyboard. Who sends something like that twice? And how did they know I was digging? I hadn't told anyone except Claire. And Thomas Avery, I suppose, but he was court-appointed. Professional at lunch, I stepped outside to the faculty parking lot and called the number back. Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Of course, burner numbers. I stood there under the shade of a cedar tree, watching a group of seniors laugh their way toward Whataburger across the street. Normal life happening 10 feet away from me, north of 6 figures. Reno, move it before she files. And now anonymous warnings. That afternoon, Thomas emailed subject line, preliminary findings. I closed my office door before opening it. There were 4 attached PDFs, account summaries, transfer logs. A chart showing movement between Whitaker Consulting's primary Chase account in Austin and the Reno account at Silver State Bank. The first transfer to Reno. June 3, 2021, Prom, $125,000. The memo line simply read, Consulting Reserve, in July, another $80,000, in October $48,000, the one Claire saw. By December 2022, the Reno balance was listed at $742,318, $742,000. I read the number 3 times to make sure I wasn't misplacing a digit. In 2022, Daniel told me we needed to delay replacing the roof because cash was tight. I had climbed a ladder myself to put a tarp over a leak near the guest room. $742,000. Why Reno? Why not just keep it here? And why start moving money in mid-2021? That was the same summer Daniel insisted on separate credit cards for bookkeeping clarity. When I got home that evening, there was an envelope taped to my condo door, no return address. Inside was a single printed sheet, a photo of me leaving Thomas Avery's office building downtown, taken from across the street. The timestamp in the corner was from 2 days ago. My coat, my hair pulled back, my purse on my shoulder. Someone had been watching. I sat down on the edge of my couch and looked at the photo again. This wasn't just about money. Who goes to this length over financial disclosure in a divorce? Unless the money isn't the only thing at risk. I drove straight to Claire's apartment near Zilker Park. She opened the door before I knocked, like she'd been pacing. I handed her the photo. She didn't say anything for a full 10 seconds. Okay, she finally said. This is not just Dad trying to scare you. Who else would it be? She walked to her kitchen counter and pulled out her laptop. I didn't tell you everything about that night, she said. My stomach tightened. What night? The one I recorded. She opened the original video file. There's more before and after what I showed in court. Why didn't you play all of it? Because the rest doesn't just involve you. She hit play and fast-forwarded to a point I hadn't seen. Daniel was on the phone, pacing. No, she doesn't have access. It's clean. Nevada's separate. Even if she pushes, they won't connect it unless someone starts asking the wrong questions. He paused, listening. Then he said something that made my hands go cold in a way I won't dramatize, just describe plainly. It's not just divorce money, it's protection. Protection from what? The voice on the other end was faint, but it wasn't Mark Ellis. It was a woman. Do you recognize her? I asked. Claire shook her head. No, but I've heard her before. When? She called the house a few times last year. Late. He'd step outside to answer. I sat back in her chair. Late calls, Houston trips. A silver Lexus in my driveway. But this felt bigger than an affair. Protection, I repeated. From who? Claire hesitated. Mom, what exactly does Dad do for his clients? Corporate risk assessment, I said automatically. She raised an eyebrow. What does that actually mean? I opened my mouth, closed it. For 28 years, I accepted broad explanations. He evaluated vulnerabilities. He structured compliance frameworks, oil and gas, energy logistics, midstream operations. I never asked for specifics because I trusted him. The next morning, Thomas called again. Mrs. Whitaker, I need to ask you something off the record. I closed my office door. Go ahead. Have you ever heard of Red Mesa Holdings? No. It's an LLC formed in Delaware in 2021. The Reno account has made multiple transfers to it. How much? Approximately $410,000 over 18 months. My knees felt weak. What kind of company is it? That's the issue. It doesn't appear to have active operations. No website, no employees listed. A shell. I can't use that term yet, he said carefully. But it raises questions. Questions. I felt like my entire life had become a stack of questions. What happens next? I asked. I'll submit a request for full discovery on Red Mesa, he said. But Mrs. Whitaker, once we go there, this stops being a simple divorce proceeding. What does it become? There was a long pause on the line. Potential fraud. Possibly federal interest. Federal. I thought about the anonymous texts. The photo protection. Was Daniel protecting money or protecting himself? And if federal agencies started looking, where would that leave me? Married for 28 years, joint tax returns, my name on the house. What if I wasn't just the wife in the dark? What if on paper I looked complicit? That night, another text came, this one different. You need to ask him about 5/17/21. Just a date. May 17, 2021. I opened my old digital calendar and scrolled back. May 17, 2021. Monday. Daniel was in Denver. Or at least, that's what he told me. But my calendar had a note I'd forgotten. Bank, 2:30 p.m. Why would I have a bank appointment on a day he was supposedly in Denver? And why don't I remember what happened there? May 17, 2021. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark in the South Lamar condo, watching the red numbers on the clock flip from 2:11 to 2:12 to 2:13. At 6:30 a.m., I drove to Chase on Bee Caves Road before work, the same branch we'd used for 15 years. The same branch where they sent Daniel a retirement gift basket when he moved his primary business accounts there. The lobby smelled like burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. A young banker named Luis called me back to his desk. He couldn't have been older than 28. How can I help you today? I need records from May 17, 2021, I said. Any documents I signed. He typed for a moment, then he paused. You closed a joint savings account that day, he said. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not dramatic, just a quiet internal click. Closed, I repeated. Yes, Mom, balance transferred out. How much? He turned his screen slightly away, professional reflex. $212,406. $212,000. I gripped the edge of his desk. And where did it go? I'm sorry, I can't see the receiving account number here. Just that it was transferred per signed authorization. Signed by who? He turned the screen toward me this time. There was my signature, and Daniel's dated May 17, 2021. I stared at my name. The loops were mine. The slant was mine. But I had no memory of closing that account. What time was this? I asked. 2:37 p.m. My calendar said bank. 2:30 p.m. So I had been there. Why don't I remember signing away $212,000? At work, I couldn't focus. A sophomore named Grant was telling me about his SAT prep schedule, and I nodded while my mind replayed that signature. It wasn't forged. It was mine, which meant one of two things. Either I signed something without understanding it, or I signed something believing it was something else. Daniel handled paperwork quickly, efficiently. He'd slide pages across the kitchen island and say, just standard restructuring. Sign here. I trusted that, but $212,406 isn't standard. Where did it go? And why move it the same month the Reno account opened? That evening, I drove back to Cedar Ridge. The silver Lexus was there again. This time, I didn't park across the street. I pulled into my own driveway. Daniel opened the front door before I knocked. You don't live here anymore, he said. I signed something on May 17, 2021, I replied. What was it? He didn't answer right away. The Lexus keys were on the entry table. A woman's heels sat neatly beside them. Who's here? I asked. That's not relevant. It is to me. He stepped outside and pulled the door halfway closed behind him. We closed an old savings account, he said. Consolidation. Into Reno? His jaw tightened. You've been talking to that accountant too much. $212,000, Daniel. His eyes flickered, just slightly, and that was enough. It was business capital, he said. You agreed. I don't remember agreeing. You were stressed. Your mother was sick. You said you didn't want to deal with numbers. My mother had been in St. David's that week, early-stage pneumonia. I'd been driving back and forth between the hospital and home, paperwork, insurance forms, consent signatures. Had he slid bank documents into that stack? Why Reno? I asked again. It's asset protection. Perfectly legal. Protection from what? Before he could answer, the front door opened behind him. She stepped out, mid-40s maybe. Dark hair pulled into a low bun. Navy blouse. Calm eyes, not flashy. Not nervous. She looked like someone used to offices. I think you should tell her, she said quietly. Daniel turned sharply. Go inside. She didn't. She looked at me instead. I'm Laura Bennett, she said. Red Mesa Holdings. The name landed between us. Red Mesa, the LLC Thomas had flagged. You're the woman from the video. I said. She didn't deny it. Daniel's voice hardened. This isn't the place. No, I said. It isn't. I looked at Laura. What exactly is Red Mesa? She held my gaze. It's a shield, she said. For what? I asked. She hesitated. For liability. Liability for what? Daniel stepped closer to me, lowering his voice. You need to stop pushing this, he said. If federal agencies start poking around, it won't just be me they look at. There it was, the first direct pressure. I didn't do anything, I said. You signed the transfers, you filed joint returns, your name is on everything. My throat felt dry. You moved money before I filed, I said. That's on you. He leaned in slightly. You think they care about timing? They care about patterns. Behind him, Laura said quietly, Daniel, but he didn't stop. If this becomes an investigation, he continued, they'll freeze assets, including yours, your retirement, your teacher pension, Claire's grad savings. He stepped back. Is that what you want? For a moment, the only sound was a sprinkler running somewhere down the street. This wasn't about hiding money from me. This was about hiding something bigger. And if I kept digging, I might not just lose a settlement. I might lose everything attached to my name. As I walked back to my car, Laura called out softly. Ask him about the pipeline audit, she said. Daniel snapped, enough. Pipeline audit. I drove away with those two words repeating in my head. When I got home, there was another envelope at my door. Inside this one was a single photocopied document header. U.S. Department of Energy. Compliance Review Notice Date. May 20, 2021, 3 days after I signed that bank transfer. Why would Daniel need a shield 3 days before a federal compliance review? And what exactly happened in that audit? The next morning, my school district email wouldn't open. Instead of my inbox, there was a message from IT. Your account has been temporarily suspended pending administrative review. Please contact Human Resources. I stared at the screen in my office at Westlake High, the hum of fluorescent lights louder than usual. Administrative review? I walked down the hall to HR. Janet Miller, who's handled payroll for as long as I've worked there, wouldn't meet my eyes at first. There's been an inquiry, she said carefully, about your financial disclosures. My financial disclosures? I repeated. She slid a printed email across her desk. It was from an investigator with the Texas Education Agency. The subject line read, Potential Undisclosed Outside Income, Sarah Whitaker. I felt my pulse in my neck. I don't have outside income, I said. Janet's voice lowered. They're asking about a $75,000 consulting payment received in 2021. What? She turned the page toward me. There it was, a 1099 issued to Sarah Whitaker from Red Mesa Holdings LLC, dated December 2021. $75,000. My signature line at the bottom acknowledging receipt. The signature looked like mine. But I have never worked for Red Mesa. I didn't receive this, I said slowly. Jeanette looked uncomfortable. The IRS copy shows it was deposited into a joint account ending in 4432.4432 was our old joint checking account. The one Daniel used to pay household bills. My hands felt steady even though nothing else did. He used my name, I said. Janet didn't respond. She didn't have to. By noon, I was placed on paid administrative leave. Word spreads fast in a high school. As I walked to my car, I saw 2 teachers glance at me, then quickly look away. I have counseled their children, helped them through divorces, and now there was an investigator asking whether I'd been taking undisclosed consulting money. Daniel's warning replayed in my head. They'll look at you too. This wasn't a hypothetical anymore. It had started. I drove straight to Thomas Avery's office downtown and laid the 1099 on his desk. He adjusted his glasses and read it twice. "This is serious," he said. "I didn't earn this money." "I believe you," he replied. "But on paper it appears you did. How does someone issue a 1099 in my name without my knowledge? If they have your social security number and access to the account receiving the funds, it's not difficult." Daniel had both. Thomas leaned back in his chair. "The timing is important," he said. "December 2021. That's within the first year of Red Mesa's formation." "So he routes money through this shell company," I said, thinking out loud. "Labels part of it as payment to me, and now it looks like I benefited." Thomas nodded slightly. "That's one interpretation. Why would he do that? To distribute tax liability, to dilute ownership trails, to create shared exposure." Shared exposure, meaning if investigators came knocking, I wouldn't just be the spouse. I'd be a participant, even if I never knew. That evening, Daniel showed up at my condo unannounced. I didn't invite him in. He stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets like we were discussing a leaking faucet. "You need to sign a statement," he said. "What kind of statement?" "Confirming you provided strategic consulting services to Red Mesa in 2021. I stared at him. "I'm a high school guidance counselor. You advised on educational risk mitigation for workforce programs." He said it smoothly, like he'd practiced. "I've never spoken to Red Mesa," I said. He exhaled. "Sarah, this is paperwork. It aligns the narrative." "Narrative?" I repeated. "If the Department of Energy expands their review, they'll see distributed consulting fees. That's cleaner than seeing unexplained transfers. And if I refuse?" His jaw tightened. "Then this becomes adversarial." "It already is." He looked tired for the first time. "You think this is about hiding money from you?" he said quietly. "It's about protecting everything we built." "We?" I asked. He didn't answer directly. "You sign the statement," he continued. "The school inquiry goes away. The divorce settles quietly. Claire isn't dragged into depositions." There it was, not a shouted threat, a practical one. My job, my daughter, my pension. After he left, another text came, not from a burner this time, from Laura. "Do not sign anything. He's trying to close a loop." I stared at the screen. Why would she warn me? I called her before I could second-guess myself. She answered on the second ring. "You shouldn't be contacting me," she said. "You contacted me first." A pause. "You're in more danger than you realize," she said. "From what?" "Daniel's primary client in 2021 wasn't just an oil company," she said carefully. "It was a subcontractor under federal environmental review. The pipeline audit, yes." "What happened in that audit?" Another pause. "Safety violations," she said. "Unreported." My chest felt tight, but my voice stayed level. "And the Reno account contingency reserves," she said. "For legal exposure?" For silence. I leaned against my kitchen counter. "Did Daniel know?" I asked. "Yes." The word was simple, flat. "And you?" "I structured the entity," she said. "That's my job. So why warn me?" Her voice shifted slightly. "Because you weren't supposed to be collateral." "Collateral?" I thought about the 1099 in my name, the fake consulting fee, the investigator. "Is this criminal?" I asked. Another pause. "If federal prosecutors decide the audit findings were intentionally suppressed," she said slowly. "Yes." My legs felt weak. "So he's trying to tie me to it," I said. "He's trying to ensure mutual risk," she replied. "Mutual risk. If I'm exposed, I'm less likely to testify, less likely to push, less likely to leave." Later that night, I logged into our old joint tax portal. The password still worked. I downloaded the full 2021 return, page after page, schedules, attachments. And there it was, Tree C, consulting income. $75,000, under my name, filed electronically with my digital signature authorization. Except I never reviewed a Schedule C in 2021. Daniel handled the complicated parts, he'd said. My name had been inserted into a structure I didn't even know existed. And now federal compliance notices were circling back to that same year. May 17, May 20, December 2021. If investigators pulled this thread, they'd see my name everywhere. Which meant Daniel didn't just hide money. He positioned me. And if I refused to cooperate now, What else is he willing to do to protect himself? Part 6. I didn't sleep. At 5:40 a.m., I was at my dining table with 3 stacks of paper: the 2021 tax return, the 1099 from Red Mesa, and the Chase transfer record from May 17. If Daniel wanted mutual risk, then he'd built it on documentation. Documentation can be dismantled. I called Thomas Avery at 7:15. I need a full forensic copy of every electronically filed return from 2019 through 2022, I said, including IP logs. There was a short pause. IP logs, he repeated. I want to know where they were submitted from. Another pause, longer this time. That's smart, he said. If Daniel filed those returns from his office desktop on Cedar Ridge, the metadata would show it, not from my laptop at the kitchen table, not from Westlake High, from him. By 10:30, Thomas called back. Preliminary check, he said. The 2021 return was filed from an IP address registered to your home internet. That doesn't narrow it down, I said. It was filed at 11:48 p.m. I was almost always asleep by then. What day? I asked. February 12, 2022. I pulled up my phone calendar again. February 12. Daniel had told me he was in Midland that weekend. He'd sent me a photo of a hotel lobby bar. I scrolled back through old texts. There it was. A picture of a whiskey glass on a marble table, timed at 8:02 p.m. But if he filed from our home IP at 11:48 p.m., he wasn't in Midland. He was in Cedar Ridge, which meant the photo had been staged. Why stage a business trip just to file taxes? Unless he didn't want me near the computer. At noon, Laura called me. I have something, she said. We met in the parking lot of a Starbucks off Loop 360. Neutral ground. She stayed in her car. I stayed in mine. Windows down, just enough to talk. She handed me a manila envelope. Inside were copies of internal Red Mesa wire authorizations. 3 transfers, one dated May 18, 2021. $212,406, the exact amount from the joint savings account, receiving entity. Red Mesa Holdings, authorized by Daniel Whitaker. There was no second signature. But there was a scanned attachment labeled Spousal Consent Acknowledgement. I pulled it out. It was a generic template. No bank letterhead, no Chase branding. Just a paragraph stating I understood and approved reallocation of joint marital assets for strategic liability structuring. My name typed at the bottom, a digital signature pasted in, not the same as the one from the Chase record. This one was slightly skewed. Cropped too tight at the bottom. He'd created a second consent document. After the bank transfer, why create a second version unless the first one didn't say what he needed it to say? Laura watched my face carefully. He's building redundancy, she said. For what? I asked. For the possibility that the audit findings escalate. Did they escalate? I asked. She hesitated. Yes. My fingers tightened around the paper. How far? There was an internal safety memo about pressure irregularities along a West Texas segment, she said. The subcontractor buried it. Daniel's firm signed off on compliance. And the Department of Energy? They requested documentation in May 2021. May 20, 3 days after I closed the savings account, 3 days after he moved $212,406. Was there a leak? I asked. Laura didn't answer directly. There was an incident in August 2021, she said quietly. It was classified as equipment failure. Classified by who? That afternoon, I received a certified letter, return address. U.S. Department of Justice. My hands were steady as I signed for it. Inside was a formal notice requesting voluntary cooperation in an inquiry related to Red Mesa Holdings and associated consultants. My name was listed under potentially involved parties. Not witness, not spouse, involved. I sat at my kitchen table and read the letter twice. Daniel hadn't just tied me to tax liability. He'd positioned me in the path of a federal investigation. My phone buzzed, a text from him. Have you signed the statement yet? I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, no. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. You're making this worse. For who? I typed the reply took longer this time, for all of us. At 4 p.m., Thomas called again. I pulled additional server logs, he said. The digital signature authorization on the 2021 return was executed from a device labeled the Dwightaker Office. Not my laptop. Not a shared family desktop, his office computer. And the Schedule C? I asked. Added 23 minutes before submission, meaning he inserted my consulting income less than half an hour before filing, without review, without discussion. That wasn't sloppiness, that was deliberate. Thomas, I said carefully, if I bring this to federal investigators before Daniel knows I have it, what happens? He didn't answer right away. If you cooperate early, he said, you establish distance. Intent matters. And if I wait, you remain structurally entangled. Structurally entangled. Daniel had built a structure around me. Accounts, LLCs, 10099s, digital signatures, all designed so that if he fell, I fell with him, unless I stepped out first. That night, another envelope appeared at my door. No stamp hand-delivered. Inside was a single flash drive. No note, no explanation. I sat on the couch holding it for a full minute. Then I plugged it into my laptop. There was one video file. Dated August 14, 2021. The screen opened to what looked like a private conference room. Daniel was there. Laura was there. And a third man I didn't recognize. They were arguing. We can't disclose that without triggering reporting obligations. The third man said. Daniel replied, if that memo surfaces, we're exposed. Laura said nothing in that clip. She just watched. Then the third man said something that made my throat tighten. There was groundwater contamination, Daniel. That's not paperwork. The video cut off abruptly, August 14, 2021, the same month as the equipment failure. The same year my name appeared on a fake consulting income form. The same period when nearly $750,000 was sitting in Reno. Daniel hadn't just been hiding money. He'd been managing fallout. And now the Department of Justice was asking questions. If I take this flash drive to them, I protect myself, but I also detonate whatever protection he thinks he built. And if he realizes I have this, what will he do next? Part 7I didn't tell Daniel about the flash drive. I called the number listed on the Department of Justice letter instead. The woman who answered identified herself as Special Agent Marisol Vega. Her voice was calm, unhurried. I received your notice, I said. I'd like to cooperate. There was a brief pause. Mrs. Whitaker, she said. Are you represented by counsel? Yes, good, bring him. We met at the federal building downtown 3 days later. Gray walls, security screening. No phones allowed past the lobby. Thomas sat beside me in a narrow conference room. With a metal table bolted to the floor, Agent Vega entered with a man in his early 40s who introduced himself as Assistant U.S. Attorney Daniel Cho. They didn't waste time. We're investigating potential falsification of compliance certifications related to a 2021 pipeline audit, Cho said. Red Mesa Holdings appears to have been used to route funds connected to that audit. I have something you should see, I said. Thomas nodded once. I slid the flash drive across the table. Agent Vega looked at it, then at me. Where did you obtain this? It was left at my residence. By whom? I don't know. That part was true. They stepped out to review the contents. Thomas leaned toward me. This is the moment, he said quietly. After this, there's no stepping back. I know. 10 minutes later they returned. Agent Vega's expression had shifted. Not dramatic, but focused. Mrs. Whitaker, she said. The individual in that video referencing groundwater contamination is a senior environmental engineer. He filed an internal memo in July 2021 flagging pressure anomalies and, I asked, that memo was never disclosed to federal regulators. I swallowed. Cho leaned forward slightly. We have bank records showing significant transfers from Whitaker Consulting to Red Mesa within days of the Department of Energy's initial document request. May 17, May 20. I nodded. My name was used on a $75,000 WEN 99, I said. Without my knowledge. We're aware, Vega replied. Your counsel provided preliminary metadata. Cho slid a folder toward me. Inside were printed copies of the IP logs Thomas had obtained. My office subpoenaed additional server records this week, Cho said. The return was filed from a desktop device located in your former home office. Daniel's office. The digital authorization included a secondary authentication text message, Cho added. To whose phone? I asked. He looked directly at me. Your husband's. For a second, I just stared at the page. So even the authentication layer traced to him. He hadn't just tied me to the structure. He'd assumed I would never step outside it. When we left the building, my phone was full of missed calls. Daniel, 5 times. Then one text. What did you do? I hadn't told him, which meant he'd been contacted. Or someone inside his circle had. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to Cedar Ridge, not to argue, to end it. The Lexus was gone. Daniel opened the door before I knocked. You went to them, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. He stepped aside to let me in. The house smelled the same. Lemon cleaner and the faint trace of his cologne. "You don't understand what you've done," he said. "I understand exactly what I've done." He ran a hand through his hair, something he only does when he's cornered. "They're building a case," he said. "And you just handed them corroboration." "You built the case," I replied. "I just stopped being part of it." His voice dropped lower. "If I go down for this, you think they won't drag you through discovery anyway? I've already given them everything." He stared at me for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Not anger, not fear. Resentment. "I protected you," he said, "by forging my income, by structuring exposure so it didn't look singular, so it looked shared. That's how you keep prosecutors from flipping one spouse against the other," he said. The words hung there, flipping. He had assumed I'd stay aligned out of self-preservation. "That wasn't protection," I said quietly. "That was leverage." He didn't deny it. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He glanced at it. I saw the caller ID before he flipped it face down. "Laura." "She knew," I said. "She knows how risk works," he replied. "Did she send me the flash drive?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said, "You think this is about environmental paperwork? There are investors, contracts. If those certifications collapse, entire portfolios collapse. Then maybe they should," I said. He laughed once, short and sharp. "You always lived in theory," he said. "College essays, ethics workshops. Real life doesn't operate like that. Groundwater contamination isn't theory." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said something I hadn't expected. "There was pressure from above," he said quietly. "From the subcontractors board. They needed the audit clean to secure federal expansion rights, so you cleaned it. I signed off based on revised data. Data you knew was incomplete." His jaw tightened. "You think I wanted a leak?" he snapped. "Did you know about it before August?" I asked. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. 2 days later, he was served with a formal federal subpoena, so was I. But mine listed me as a cooperating witness. His listed him as a target. Claire called me that evening. "Is it true?" she asked. "About the investigation?" "Yes." There was a long pause. "Did he really know?" she asked. "Yes." She exhaled slowly. "I always wondered why he kept saying he was handling risk," she said. "I didn't realize we were the risk." The final confrontation didn't happen in our kitchen. It happened in a federal deposition room. Daniel sat across from Assistant U.S. Attorney Cho, under oath. I sat against the back wall with Thomas. Laura was there too, represented by separate counsel. Cho played the August 14 video. The room was silent except for Daniel's recorded voice saying, "If that memo surfaces, we're exposed." When the clip ended, Cho asked, "Mr. Whitaker, what were you exposed to?" Daniel looked down at his hands. For the first time in 28 years, he looked uncertain, and then he said something that made the entire room still. "I wasn't the one who ordered the suppression. Ordered by who?" Part 8, ordered by who? That question sat in the deposition room like a weight. Assistant U.S. Attorney Cho didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Mr. Whitaker," he said evenly, "you just testified that you were not the one who ordered suppression of the July 2021 environmental memo. Who did?" Daniel glanced toward Laura. "Not long. Just enough." Her attorney immediately spoke. "My client is not here as a target." Cho didn't look at her. "I asked Mr. Whitaker." Daniel cleared his throat. "The directive came from the subcontractor's executive board," he said, "specifically from CFO Martin Kessler." The name meant nothing to me at first. Then I remembered the third man in the August video, the one who said, "That's not paperwork, groundwater contamination." Chu slid a document across the table. "We have email traffic indicating Red Mesa Holdings received $3.2 million in strategic advisory fees from Kessler's firm in Q3 2021. $3.2 million. I looked at Laura. She didn't look back at Daniel this time. She was staring at the table, Cho continued. "Within days of receiving those funds, Red Mesa distributed transfers to Whitaker Consulting and 2 other entities." Daniel's shoulders sank slightly, so the $742,318 in Reno wasn't the whole picture. It was just his portion. Over the next 3 weeks, the structure unraveled. Martin Kessler was indicted first. Wire fraud. Obstruction. Environmental reporting violations. Subpoenas rippled outward. Daniel was offered a choice. Cooperate fully, or face charges alongside the subcontractor's board. He chose cooperation. I wasn't in the room when he signed that agreement, but Thomas told me the terms were clear: full disclosure of financial routing, admission of falsified compliance certifications, restitution participation, in exchange, reduced criminal exposure. Laura negotiated separately. Red Mesa Holdings dissolved under federal order. Its accounts, including the Reno account, were frozen and later seized as part of the broader case. The forensic accounting that began as part of my divorce became federal evidence. As for me, the Department of Justice formally reclassified my status from potentially involved party to material witness. The difference between those two phrases feels small on paper. It isn't. The Texas Education Agency closed its inquiry after reviewing the IP logs and authentication records. My administrative leave ended quietly. Janet from HR handed me a reinstatement letter without making eye contact, but later that week she left a small potted plant on my desk. No note, just something green. At the final divorce hearing, there was no dramatic speech, no raised voices, just paperwork. Because federal forfeiture had frozen a large portion of Daniel's assets, the marital estate looked very different than it once had. The Cedar Ridge house was sold under court supervision. Proceeds were split after legal offsets. My pension remained mine. Claire's graduate savings account, which Daniel had tried to use as leverage, was confirmed untouched. The judge granted the divorce on grounds of fraud and financial misconduct. Daniel didn't look at me when it was finalized. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, just reduced. A year later, the subcontractor reached a federal settlement that included environmental remediation funds for the West Texas site. There was no dramatic headline with Daniel's name in bold. His cooperation kept him out of prison, but not out of consequence. He lost his consulting license, paid substantial civil penalties. His reputation in the energy sector dissolved almost overnight. For someone who built his identity on being the calm strategist in high-stakes rooms, that was its own kind of sentence. Laura relocated to Chicago. We never spoke again after the final deposition. I sometimes wonder if she was the one who left the flash drive. She never confirmed it. She didn't need to. Claire and I moved into a smaller house in Dripping Springs. Not grand, not new, but ours. On my first day back at Westlake High, I sat across from a senior named Ava, who was terrified of telling her parents she wanted to major in environmental science instead of business. Sometimes, I told her carefully, doing the right thing feels expensive at first. I didn't elaborate. She didn't need my history lesson, just steady eye contact and honesty. At home, I keep my own files now. Every account in my name, accessible to me. Every tax return reviewed line by line. Trust isn't a vague feeling anymore. It's documentation, it's transparency, it's asking questions even when the answers might be inconvenient. Daniel and I speak only when necessary, mostly about logistics, brief. Polite once. During a property transfer signing, he said quietly, "I never meant for you to be collateral." I looked at the papers between us. "I know," I said. That was the truth. He didn't set out to hurt me. He set out to protect himself. I was simply part of the structure. Sometimes I drive past Bee Caves Road where the Chase branch still stands. The lobby probably still smells like burnt coffee and lemon cleaner. May 17, 2021 feels like a lifetime ago. But I remember the exact weight of the pen in my hand that afternoon. I signed something I didn't fully read. That was the beginning. Not the pipeline audit, not Reno, not Red Mesa, just a signature given on trust. Now, on quiet evenings in Dripping Springs, I sit on the back porch with a legal pad balanced on my knee, budgeting for the coming school year. The cicadas start up just after sunset. The air smells like cedar and dry grass. And every line I write down, I understand completely.